A blistering, wind-swept afternoon in the jagged canyons of the high desert. A massive joint service exercise is falling apart. Multiple Navy SEAL teams are pinned down in a topographical dead zone. They are calling for everything. More overwatch, more coordination, more time. But the system has reached its limit. A critical comms relay is dead, leaving 400 warriors blind and silent. A single, narrow window of opportunity opens, lasting only a heartbeat. No one is in position to reach the relay, except a quiet medic runner in the rear. Elena Ward has exactly 9 seconds to save them all. 9 seconds that define eternity. In the elite hierarchy of naval special warfare, respect is not handed out like a participation trophy. It is earned through the weight of your kit, the depth of your scars, or the terrifying accuracy of your fire under pressure. Specialist Elena Ward, 27 years old, possessed none of these traditional markers. She was a medic runner, a specialized support role designed to be the physical connective tissue between the forward elements and the extraction point. In the eyes of the SEALs she supported during Operation Crimson Tide, she was essentially high-end logistics in a digital camouflage uniform. She was the shadow that moved the gear so the light could hit the warriors. Elena was the person who ensured the hydration was chilled, the radio batteries were cycled, and the trauma kits were organized by expiration date. She didn't participate in the aggressive, adrenaline-fueled debriefs or the complex tactical planning sessions. Instead, she spent her downtime studying the topographical maps of the Nellis Range. Not just for landmarks, but for the micro-terrain. She memorized the exact friction coefficients of the red shale rock and calculated the oxygen debt required to traverse the open, sun-bleached washes at different temperatures. While the operators were dreaming of kinetic contact and tactical glory, Elena was dreaming of biomechanics and recovery windows. "She's reliable, I guess," a young lieutenant named Miller had remarked to his chief during a lull in the multi-day exercise. Miller was riding the high of a successful qualification, his ego as polished as his high magnification optics. "But she's just support. She doesn't have the situational awareness or the metabolic conditioning of a Tier 1 operator. Keep her in the rear with the crates. We don't need a civilian-minded runner cluttering the tactical net when the world turns red and the frequencies get tight." The desert environment was her only confidant. The Nellis Range was a graveyard of ambition, where the sand didn't just blow, it scoured. Elena spent hours watching the way the wind moved the grit, knowing that the smallest shift in surface density could mean a slip, and a slip in this terrain meant a broken ankle. She checked the spikes on her specialized footwear every night, ensuring the tungsten tips were sharp enough to bite into the volcanic glass. She was a silent ghost among the giants, preparing for a race they didn't even know was happening. Elena had heard Miller's comment through the thin nylon wall of the command tent, but she didn't flinch. She had been trained to exist in the gray space, the area where you see everything but are noticed by no one. While the operators focused on the kill chain, Elena was focusing on the time-space continuum. She knew that in the high desert, a mission doesn't usually fail because of a lack of firepower. It fails because of a lack of seconds. She understood that time was the only resource you couldn't replenish once it started leaking away through the cracks of a poor plan. Her background was intentionally sparse in the unit logs. Support specialist, prior track experience, high endurance rating. No one bothered to ask what prior track actually meant. If they had, they would have discovered she was a world-class sprinter who had traded an Olympic podium for a career in service after a family tragedy. She had spent years mastering the explosive start and the terminal velocity required to win races by fractions of an inch. She was a master of the lactic threshold, knowing exactly how long she could push her body past its breaking point before it gave out. To the SEALs, she was just the girl with the bags. They saw the logistics, but they completely missed the high-performance engine idling beneath the surface. During the first 48 hours of the exercise, Elena performed her role with a mechanical, almost invisible precision. She moved through the jagged terrain without making a sound. She monitored the physiological rhythm of the teams, watching for signs of heat exhaustion that the squad leaders were too proud to acknowledge. She watched the way the sun hit the rocks, creating a shimmering mirage that could hide a sensor mast or a blind spot. She was a silent anchor, waiting for the one variable that no training manual or digital simulation could predict. As the SEAL platoons pushed deeper into the Firesack Valley, Elena noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The birds stopped singing. The wind took on a sharp, metallic edge. She checked her portable atmospheric sensor. The barometric pressure was diving. A localized dust storm, thick with mineral-heavy grit, was beginning to swirl through the canyons. This wasn't just weather. It was a tactical obstacle that would jam everything from zippers to the most delicate communications electronics. The dead zone, the area where communication becomes a ghost, was expanding. And as the 4 SEAL platoons pushed deeper into the horseshoe-shaped valley, the system reached its catastrophic breaking point. If you think support roles are often underestimated, comment, it's unfair. The crisis didn't arrive with the thunder of a simulated explosion. It arrived with the terrifying weight of absolute silence. 3 SEAL platoons, Team Alpha, Team Bravo, and Team Charlie, were maneuvering through a narrow, jagged corridor designed to simulate a high-threat extraction under heavy fire. Suddenly, the primary communications relay, positioned on a central ridge to provide a bridge between the groups, took a simulated hit from atmospheric electromagnetic interference. The blue dots on the commander's digital map went static, then vanished entirely. 400 men were suddenly cut off from their overhead overwatch and from each other. In the high-stakes world of modern warfare, information is the only thing that separates a mission from a massacre. Lead! This is Alpha. We've lost the frequency. We have no eyes. I repeat, we are blind on the western flank. The radio crackled with a frantic, distorted desperation. The commander, positioned at a temporary command post 300 yards away, slammed his fist onto the tactical table. He was looking at a valley that was now a black box. We need that relay active. If we can't sync the movement of Charlie and Alpha, they're going to walk into each other's line of fire in this visibility. We need more coverage. We need more time. The tech sergeant at the console shook his head, his face illuminated by the flickering red warning lights. Sir, the interference is localized. It's a simulated EMI pulse. We can't reboot from here. Someone has to hit the manual hard reset on the pedestal, or the entire grid stays dark for the duration of the evaluation. But the desert was out of both. The simulation's enemy force, a group of elite evaluators using thermal sensors and high-speed drones, was closing in on the blind spots created by the relay failure. If the relay wasn't manually rebooted within the next 90 seconds, the exercise would be called a total casualty failure. The commander looked at his technicians, their faces pale in the flickering light of the monitors. The hardware was functioning, but the connection was severed by the geography. Who's closest to the relay point? The commander barked into the local net, his voice strained with the weight of impending failure. Negative, sir. My team is pinned in the wash. We can't move without giving away our position and getting marked KIA, Alpha replied. We're 200 yards out and silhouetted against the ridge. We'll be tagged before we cover 10 feet, Bravo reported. The relay point sat on a small, exposed pedestal of volcanic rock in the middle of a fire zone, a wide, flat area where the simulated enemy sensors were currently scanning in a relentless, mechanical cycle. Moving across that zone was tactical suicide for a heavy kit operator. The gear made them too slow, too encumbered, too visible to the thermal sweeps that were hunting for the outline of a soldier. Every time the sensor mast rotated, it mapped the heat signatures of anything larger than a lizard. The commander scanned his secondary manifest with a shaking hand, looking for a miracle. His eyes landed on a single icon, positioned in a shallow, sandy depression only 40 yards from the pedestal. It was the support runner. It was Elena. Medic Ward, do you copy? The commander asked, his voice dropping into a lower, more desperate frequency. I have visual on the relay, sir. Elena's voice came back. Calm, rhythmic, almost terrifyingly steady compared to the chaos on the other channels. I've been tracking the sensor sweep from the ridge mast for the last hour. The enemy scan has a specific mechanical cycle. Every 40 seconds, there is a gap where the optics pivot toward the north ridge to reset the baseline. That gap lasts exactly 9 seconds. The room in the command tent went silent. The technicians stopped typing. They were looking at a rookie support runner who had just provided a higher-level tactical analysis than the veteran squad leaders. She wasn't just watching the relay. She was hacking the environment with her eyes and her patience. She had seen the pattern that the operators, distracted by the fight, had missed. "Ward, can you reach that pedestal?" the commander asked, knowing he was asking her to risk the death tag of the evaluation. "I can reach it, sir," Elena replied, "but I have to leave my ruck. I have to move in the unprotected state. If I miss the window by even half a second, I'm out of the game and the relay stays dark, and Alpha will be neutralized by the Charlie crossfire." "What's your probability of success as specialist?" "If I hit my stride at the 4-second mark of the sensor pivot, I have a 100% success rate," Elena said. There was no ego in her voice, only the cold, hard math of a professional athlete. "But I only have 9 seconds. I won't have time to look back. I won't have time to breathe. I need you to trust the math." The commander looked at the clock. He looked at the 400 SEALs who were currently drifting into a lethal, uncoordinated collision. He had no other options. He had called for everything. For helicopters, for air support, for more time. And all the universe had given him was a girl in the dirt and 9 seconds of empty, searing air. If you realize sometimes the most important person isn't the most visible one, comment, "I was wrong." The world narrowed down to a single horizontal line and the rhythmic, pounding ticking of a digital watch. Elena Ward stood at the edge of the Rocky Depression, her boots digging into the loose, sun-baked shale. She had shed her heavy rucksack, her tactical vest, and even her primary radio. She was wearing only her lightweight base layer and her specialized carbon fiber running shoes that she had kept tucked away in her kit for emergencies. She wasn't the medic anymore. She was a weapon of pure kinetic energy, refined by years of trackside torture and the memory of every race she had ever won. She felt the heat of the sand through her soles, but it was just another data point. Her heart was beating at a resting 50, but she knew that in 3 seconds it would spike to 190. She watched the sensor array on the far ridge. It was a rotating mast of infrared cameras and lidar scanners. Rotate, pivot, pause. She began her specialized breathing exercises, the same ones she used at the Olympic trials when the eyes of the world were watching. Inhale, hold, release. She focused on the lactic acid already simmering in her legs, turning the heat of the desert into the fuel for her explosive, fast-twitch muscle fibers. "Command, ready for the window," Elena whispered. "Confirmed, Ward. You have the net. On your mark. 3, 2, 1. The sensor mast hit its northern pivot. The fire zone was officially clear of electronic eyes for a fraction of a minute. Elena didn't run like a soldier. She didn't carry the tactical weight of the ground. She ran like a predator that had forgotten how to feel pain. Her stride was a masterpiece of physics, low to the ground, maximizing the horizontal force of every push-off. The air around her felt like liquid glass, thick and resistant, but she cut through it with a form that had been perfected over 1,000,000 repetitions. Second one, her acceleration was violent. She covered the first 10 yards before the dust from her initial step had even settled. Her body was low. Her center of gravity was a perfect, unwavering line. The SEALs in the wash watched in stunned silence, their jaws dropping. They didn't see a person. They saw a blur of camouflage and intent. Second 3, she hit her terminal velocity. Her heart rate was a steady drumbeat of 190 beats per minute. Through her peripheral vision, she could see the heat waves shimmering off the sand. But she didn't blink. She was covering 5 meters with every stride, her feet barely touching the ground. The volcanic glass under her shoes crunched in a rhythmic staccato that sounded like automatic fire. Second 5, she was halfway. The sun was a physical weight on her back, 115 degrees of searing pressure. She could feel the pressure of the electronic eyes returning to her grid as the mass began its slow swing back. She didn't just run. She navigated a narrow corridor of safety that only she had the math to see. Her lungs were screaming for oxygen that her blood didn't have time to process. Second 7, the sensor mass began its return rotation. The warning light on her wrist device began to flicker orange, then a frantic red. She could feel the touch of the infrared sensors on the back of her neck. The evaluator on the far ridge saw a flicker on his screen, a movement so fast he assumed it was a glitch in the software. Second 9, Elena reached the pedestal. She didn't slow down to stop. She used her momentum to slide into the small, jagged crevice beneath the relay box, her skin tearing against the basalt. Her hands shot out. Her fingers found the master override switch through the dust, and she slammed it home with the weight of her entire body. Click. The relay's status light turned from a dying, flickering red to a brilliant, pulsing green. "Relay active," Elena gasped into her mic, her heart feeling like it was about to burst through her ribs. "Sitrep, I am tucked, returning to cover on the next cycle." But the relay didn't just turn on. It exploded the digital map back to life in the command tent. The 400 blue dots synced instantly. The Overwatch cameras cleared of interference. The dead zone was conquered. The coordination was restored. "Alpha, pivot west. Charlie, hold your fire. The lane is open. Go, go, go!" The commander roared, his voice now full of the authority he had almost lost to the desert sand. Because of that 9-second run, the bottleneck was shattered. The SEAL teams, now possessing perfect information and synchronized timing, moved with a lethal efficiency that bypassed the enemy ambush entirely. They were no longer 480 individuals lost in the dust. They were a single, flowing, unstoppable force of nature. They moved like a river of steel through the canyon, reclaiming the initiative that had been stolen by a communication error. The SEAL who had called her just support watched the relay status on his head-up display. He looked toward the pedestal, where the small, camouflage-clad figure was still tucked into the deep shadows of the rocks, barely visible. He realized that his entire career, his entire team, had just been saved by the person he had deemed metabolically incapable. Elena had beaten the sensors. She had beaten the desert. She had beaten time itself. She had traded her safety for their success, and she hadn't asked for a single word of thanks. If you believe timing matters more than speed, comment, "I owe you." The exercise concluded 40 minutes later with a perfect rating for the Naval Special Warfare Unit, the first in the range's history. The SEAL platoons had successfully executed a complex extraction that would be studied at the Academy for decades. As the transport trucks rolled onto the range to collect the exhausted teams, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of victory, ozone, and relief. Elena had already retrieved her heavy ruck and tactical vest. She was back in her quiet professional stance, standing by the water pallets, handing out electrolyte drinks and checking for heat stress symptoms as if nothing had happened. She didn't seek out the commander for praise. She didn't tell her story to the other support runners. She simply checked the expiration dates on the remaining trauma kits and updated the medical manifest. Her hands were slightly shaking from the adrenaline dump, and her knees were scraped and bloody, but her face remained a mask of professional neutrality. The lieutenant who had dismissed her earlier approached her first. He was drenched in sweat, his face smeared with grease paint and desert dust, looking like he had aged 5 years in one afternoon. He stopped 3 feet away, his chest heaving. He didn't say a word at first. He just looked at Elena, and then he looked at the pedestal on the ridge, which was now silhouetted against a bruised purple setting sun. He looked over at his chief, who was also watching her. "Chief, tell me I didn't just see what I thought I saw," Miller whispered. The chief, a veteran of 20 years, spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. "You saw a master at work, Lieutenant. You were looking for a hammer, and you forgot that sometimes the most important tool in the box is the one that's designed to move fast and strike once." The lieutenant turned back to Elena. "I saw the run on the telemetry," he said, his voice quiet and devoid of its usual sharp arrogance. "The sensors said nothing could cross that zone in under 12 seconds. We were all looking at our maps. trying to find a way around the math. We didn't even see the gap. We thought the system was broken, but it was our vision that was failing. Elena offered him a cold water bottle. The gap was always there, sir. You just have to be willing to shed the weight to see it. Speed isn't always about how fast you move. It's about how little you carry when the world gets heavy. The lieutenant took the bottle, but he didn't drink. He stood at attention, not because of a military regulation, but because of a staggering realization of his own ignorance. He offered a slow, synchronized, silent salute. It was a recognition of a peer, a recognition of a master of a different craft who had held the line when the masters of war could not. You weren't support today, Ward, the lieutenant whispered, his eyes meeting hers with a new intensity. You were the mission. Without you, we were just 400 men walking into a wall. One by one, the other SEALs who had witnessed the 9-second run or benefited from the relay's rebirth offered their own gestures of respect. A simple nod, a firm hand on a shoulder, a good work specialist that carried the weight of a medal. No one cheered. There were no high fives. In their world, real expertise doesn't need a loud audience. It only needs results that speak for themselves. The commander himself walked down from the command truck. He didn't offer a speech. He simply handed Elena a small bronze challenge coin with the unit's crest on it. Keep this, specialist, and the next time we're in the box, I want you on the primary net. Your math is better than our satellites. Elena returned the professional nods and went back to her inventory. She knew that tomorrow she would still be the girl with the bags to the rest of the base. She knew that the military hierarchy wouldn't disappear overnight just because of a sprint. But she also knew that the next time the radio went silent and the SEALs called for everything, they wouldn't be looking for a general with a booming voice. They would be looking for the runner who knew how to find the 9 seconds that changed the world. If you believe the smallest actions can have the biggest impact, comment, I will live honorably. In our modern life, we are often obsessed with volume. We believe that the person with the most resources, the most power, or the loudest voice is the one who will ultimately solve the problem. We assume that the front line is the only place where real change happens, and we dismiss those in the rear as just support or backup. We confuse role with capability, and we judge people by the equipment they carry rather than the spirit they possess. But the story of Elena Ward is a powerful, enduring reminder of a deeper, more profound truth that our society often forgets. True impact doesn't always come from a massive explosion or a decades-long strategy. Sometimes it comes from a single, precise, disciplined action taken in a window of time that no one else was looking for. Real strength is the ability to recognize that your role, no matter how small it seems to the outside world, is the only thing holding the entire system together. It is the realization that in any high-performance system, the tail is just as lethal as the teeth. Elena didn't save those 400 SEALs by becoming a hero in the traditional sense. She saved them by being an absolute expert in her own lane. She understood the physics of the environment better than the planners. She understood the timing of the system better than the operators. And she understood the limits of her own body better than anyone. She chose to act not for the glory of the sprint, but for the integrity of the formation. She traded her invisibility for a moment of absolute exposure, and in doing so, she became the anchor of the elite. When you look at your own life, your job, your family, your community, remember the 9-second run. Remember that the person you might be dismissing as just a background player might be the one currently holding the relay together for everyone else. They are the IT technicians who fix the servers at 3 a.m. so your business can open at 9. They are the administrative assistants who catch the errors in the multi-million-dollar contracts. They are the quiet ones who do the silent homework in the shadows so you can perform in the light. The world is a complex network of interdependencies. When one node fails, the entire structure is at risk. But often the solution isn't to build a bigger node. It's to find the person who can bridge the gap in the window that's available. Elena Ward proved that a single individual, armed with nothing but preparation and timing, can overwrite the failure of $1 million system. Respect isn't given to the title on your door or the badge on your chest. It's given to the integrity you show when the world is looking for a solution and you're the only one who has done the work. Always look deeper. Value the quiet professional, because one day your world might hit a bottleneck. The radio might go silent, and you'll find yourself praying for someone like Elena Ward to stand up and run. Be that person. Be the one who knows how to find the window. Because in the end, the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people who can find the 9 seconds that matter and have the courage to run through them without looking back. If you believe the people who step up in the smallest windows of time can make the biggest difference, leave a comment below. And if this story reminds you that real impact often happens in seconds no one else notices, don't forget to subscribe for more.